Number three, actually, we could have had a top 10 easily. We have played some sick games this year, absolutely killer games. But I mean, it's only really like at what stage? How do you differentiate? Oh, here's number six, and then here's number eight. So just three of the best. These are what I hands down recommend. Best games of the year, and I played a lot of good games this year, and as have you as well. And a lot of games we played together as well that have also made this list. More to come on that later. Um, but yeah, number three. Okay, number three, best game of the year, 2021. Loop Hero, baby. I don't have like a little drum roll sound kit. I should have put it in. I'll edit the little drum roll sound kit afterwards. Yeah, Loop Hero. Um, Absolutely love this game. Actually, I have already written what I've written the review about it. I can just read through what I've written on it. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing a trailer for Loop Hero back in December 2020 and thinking, what the hell is even going on here? And I'm sure developers knew this would be the case as well for when revealing the game for the first time. So the trailer is accompanied with like a narrator explaining exactly what the aim of the game is, your goals, as it shows them like frame by frame. It's a kind of a very different trailer because it's not exactly the most straightforward game, and it's hard to convey what that is without just jumping in and experience. Yeah, no, it's not, unless you count like a straight loop as it. It's a loop. Yes. We're not above dad jokes, by the way, on the stream. Wendy can fill that in. It's all going to be coming from Wendy. That's true. We're for the kids and the parents. Yeah, even though the trailer didn't really explain itself in its best way, it still didn't really convey the game, how the game actually played. But nevertheless, I knew it was killer. It looked insane from the get go. It's from Four Quarters Studio, published by Devolver. It's a Devolver joint. They've knocked it out of the park this year, as they do every year. Um, they do. So they also made Death's Door. Yeah, it is. It's new on Switch, but it was on PC in about like September or August, I think. It's very cute. Well, morbidly cute. There's a lot of talk about death, and it's very existential, and yeah, it talks about the afterlife and dying, and but it's like inspired by like Studio Ghibli. The seen an interview with the devs, and they said it's like Studio Ghibli inspired and stuff. So mm, yeah, yes, okay. Yeah, yes, okay. So Loop Hero is like an auto playing game. So it's like an auto battler. So you kind of work your way around a track, and when you're working your way around the track, you kind of auto fight enemies as you come across them on the track. They'll just spawn in randomly, and you start at like level one, and then or like loop one, and then make your way all the way up to like loop 10 or loop 20. Well, loop 20 is pretty high, like because the it multiplies in difficulty by the amount of loops you go through. But you tackle like little monsters as you come across them, and then each monster you build, you get a little bit of loot, maybe a little sword or shield or armor, stuff like that, just to kind of like buff your character as you're going around. So you're getting better each time you go around the loop. But the monsters are also getting better, but then the loop is getting better. Honestly, it's insatiable. Like just the quality of the game and that just hunger for the next loop. It's like one more loop, like one more loop, one more. It just keeps going. It's so good. It's a bit, yeah, yeah. You're right. It's like a build. So you build. The idea is like the story is that you've lost your memory and that you're trying to rebuild this post-apocalyptic world from your memory, and you'll get different tiles that you spawn in. I have to put my drink down. That's how serious this game. So you kind of get you kind of like you get cards as well each time you build. It's kind of like a card building game in a sense, but not really. So you kind of have oh, hold on, I have a bit of footage that I can play in the background as well. Why didn't I do that? First game of the year show. Give me some slack. First game, first game. So yeah, as you can see, kind of playing in the background. Yeah, you kind of got like this idea where you come across a monster on the road, as we were saying, and then you'll fight the monster. And you can build your stats by getting equipment, and then you drag and drop your equipment into slots. But also, what's kind of unique about the game is that on the bottom track you'll start gaining cards, and a lot of those cards kind of pertain to the world itself. So you can get forest cards, and then you can populate with forests, and then once you populate with forests, that boosts your stamina. It kind of boosts your mount. Like if you have mountains, you put a mountain down, that boosts your HP, and the more mountains you stack on and the more buildings you build down, the more congested the game gets, the more enemies spawn, the more health you get, and it just cranks. Like one loop, it starts slow. That is one criticism I will say. The game does start slow. Every single game you go into, the first 1, 2, 3 loops are pretty slow. That's the only thing about it. And I know that in previous buff or the latest patches, they kind of introduced like speeding the game up, because they kind of knew that the first like 3 or 4 loops were very slow, and it takes you a while to kind of get into and kind of get really good loot. And if you don't get really good loot, it's kind of boring at the start, and you're only kind of earning because you only move really slowly around the track. You can pause it as well, just so that you can prepare for the next monster encounter, but the game kind of happens kind of fast. It's really good. Different tiles spawn specific monsters, which drop specific resources or random equipment loot, and then you battle monsters automatically, so you have to fight regardless if you're low or on HP or not. You can't stop or skip an upcoming fight unless you have like an Oblivion card. You can just delete the card out, but which is kind of important. But otherwise, you can't stop the flow. You can't skip a fight. You can't you have to fight a monster every time. All you can do is just pause, because it's an auto battler and it's an auto walker. So the game is moving regardless. You can just either choose to pause it or let the dang thing play and face your fate then and there.
It looks like a simple game when you first look at it, like even like with the visuals like up at the moment. It's very specific. It's very interesting to watch it because you're constantly going around in a circle. It's very free flow, so it's a very chill game, but there's a lot of like.
It is chill.
Obviously, when you come to the cards, you place like mountains and trees and those sort of things. So it gives you bonuses, and it's very strategic about where you place them, because
absolutely
you get your loot, which is like on the right side of the like panel that you're following, and it gives you again different like power ups and everything.
Absolutely.
So it's so interesting. I'm like, someone who hasn't played it yet, it kind of tempts me to want to play it, because I love those sort of like pixelated kind of like top-down kind of style games as well, and that's what like I was like, yeah, this is so intriguing. I haven't played it, but I want to play it.
Yeah, no, you're dead right, and that's where the strategy and the appeal of Loop Hero lies, with how smartly you place your tiles on the road to populate the loop. Because if you populate your loop too early with a load of monsters, then you're not going to make it to the end. Like, you got to kind of stagger it out so that you're coming across loot tiles, and then you're coming across monster loot, like that. But if you stagger them and like kind of crush them all together, you kind of end up peaking at either kind of getting too weak too early or too strong too late kind of thing. It just, yeah, that's the kind of strategy and the appeal of it. It's really good. I just see Dark Magician in the chat with where's Apex. Don't worry, we have the bonus game section, which does that does apply to multiplayer games. I always say like a multiplayer game that keeps going every year. Normally I have like my first, second and third game, which is always in 2020 mainly, unless a game has gotten a substantial update and it's single player, or 2021. Well, what are years even anymore? This year just feels like last year. But yeah, overall I'd say the best bits from the game, I'd say it's just has like a wonderfully rich like gothic pixel art aesthetic, and I think that's why you really like it, and I caught on to you're all about. I know that you are very much into like pixel graphics, and that also is what caught me as well. But the soundtrack as well, the 8-bit soundtrack is absolutely wicked. Like, it's just all killer, no filler. But one other thing is like it's also completely original. Like, it's an entirely original take on strategy and kind of auto battler games that I have genuinely never seen before, and that is why it takes the number 3 spot this year. It's just because I've never seen anything like this done before, and it was either I'm sorry, it was either this or Spelunky 2. And it's just because this is much more original. That's why I gave the spot to. I just thought that Loop Hero is so good. Yeah.
Like the old school like Zelda games, like top down, like pixelated. Like this is a great one. Like
Absolutely.
it's a little more relaxed. It's not as explorative, but like it's a little more of the strategic end of things. Like
Mm.
happening. Do you think like it's very aesthetic as well, because you can build, like you put in like not just like your area but also, like you said, like loot tiles as well as outposts and different things.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a city builder as well.
It is, in a sense, very, yeah, you're right. It is a very minimal kind of like a city builder kind of that sort of world building that comes into it as well. So you're trying to balance your character on the map while also trying to build a world strategically from the cards and resources that you get. And that I've never seen something like that done in this sort of context before. And another one of the best bits that I've listed is that the gameplay loop itself is totally addictive. It just has that one more loop. I can't help but nearly say one more tune every time I say that. Well, it just has that one more loop sort of feel to it. And it has 3 different classes as well that you can play. There's like a straight up warrior class, then there's like a dexterity kind of like rogue class that kind of has like quick attacks but weak sort of thing. And then also has like a conjurer, like a summon, like a necromancer that can like summon skeletons to fight for you. But they each play like really differently and really unique, which is, I think, just brilliantly. It's just brilliantly done. Doesn't need another one, although I would welcome some sort of DLC that added like a new kind of character on. Yeah, I don't know what they could do, but because they seem to have like the dexterity class and then they have the magic class and then they have the strength class, I'm not really too sure. But either way, what they have got with the characters is really tight. Now, the downside to this, there's not that many downsides to the game. There is always a but. I'm so sorry. But it's actually in the background. You'll probably see the footage playing. That's the necromancer class who summons skeletons to fight for them. That's, I think, probably my favorite class. Actually, I do like the dexterity as well, just because you can get insane. They're all based around critical hits. But anyway, the downer side, like I said earlier when I was talking through the article, the map is kind of slow to start. That's one of the main things. There's another thing after that, but regardless of this increased speed toggle, it's just the nature of how the gameplay loop. Yeah, it is naturally slow to start. It only really kicks off from like 5 to about 10. 10 is kind of like pretty much the max, not the max number of loops. You could probably go on forever, but it's probably I don't know. It's probably the highest you will get before you come across like before you go for the boss, like who will appear whenever you get to a certain like kind of threshold in loops. But yeah, I think that's the slow start is really bad. Not that it's bad, like once you get into each game and each session, it gets going from about 4 or 5 onwards. It's just the start a little bit slow for me, but that's fine. And I think one of the most frustrating parts, so the next bad point I would say, is probably, so there's a part in the game where you come to, or a time in the game, a time period of about 10 hours, and I'm gritting my teeth for this. So you have to grind rare resources that are only found in like a specific circumstance to progress the main story. And that is an exercise in patience and frustration. It's just, I don't know. I just hate grinding for things as it is in games, and this seems like kind of oddly at ends with how the game works. Like each section of Loop Hero, and each session, I should say, or each loop of Loop Hero, it doesn't feel like it should be. It doesn't feel like it's grindy, even though you're the same like 3 heroes. There's always something different because each session you could build the world differently, so it's always going to be different. Monsters are going to be, the monsters are the same, but where their placement are and where they randomly generate is going to be different, which adds a whole layer of strategy to each level, and that adds to its one more loop, but one more loop. But yeah, there's about a section of the game for about 10 hours. About, I don't know, I've played the game for about 50 hours, but from about the 30 hour to about 40 hour mark, I was just grinding for this rare resource that you have to specifically place a certain amount of cards, and you have to you randomly get cards. It's just not great. Like, I would prefer to see that go by the wayside. Like, it's too it's too random number generator for me to happen to get the certain amount of cards that you need in the certain location that you need in the certain thing at this certain time. It's just way too, and you have to do this I think maybe 10 times to grind the like the 10 different resources you need to upgrade your main story path. Fine if that's a secondary objective, or
It's so game like this. At some point, you progress so much in the game. You get to 80%, and there's always just before you get to the obviously the 90% mark. There's just for some reason that 10% that you gotta put in a little extra. Like it seems to do it sometimes in Link, like any of the Zelda games. Like you always have to put in that like 1 extra hour of grinding in order to progress.
Yeah, you're right.
Started the year and little. It was to a point that we got to a point in the level that we had to go back and grind through several levels in order to progress. Like we weren't strong enough to progress in it naturally. And I feel like there's always that thing. Like I feel like it sounds like this game. You get to a point that you're no longer naturally progressing. You kind of just have to sit here and just go.
Absolutely. That 100% that, because you hit this wall, all of a sudden you're progressing. You build like outside, you get of the main story, you get like your resource, and you build a little village like a blacksmith that upgrades your cards and stuff like that. As you can probably see on the screen, like on the footage now, but before that it's all natural progression. You're getting resources naturally, but at that point, like you said, you hit this wall and then you're just kind of stuck there for a while. In fact, I didn't even know how to get that specific resource until I had to YouTube how to actually get the resources, and it was so specific that it wasn't even worth it. But I loved the game at the time, and I was really like addicted to it, so I put the time in to get it. But I could see why a lot of people would stop at that time, because it was just too bad. But I am really unslating this part of the game, and it is kind of bad, but the rest of it just makes up for it so much. Like the rest of the game is so exciting, it's so tense as well. Overall, like the summary of the game, I would say the game is a true innovator in the space, and there's nothing else like it out there. There is nothing else like it. I don't know anything else that is. I would hope somebody can direct me to something like this, but I am pretty deep in like the indie space, and that we're trawling through like the underground of Steam, and I've not seen anything like this. I have seen auto battlers. Like an auto battler is like a genre in itself, but I've never seen anything do it like this before, and that's why this game is just hands down the number 3. Definitely, it's absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I think so.
It's definitely what I'm interested in. Feel of like all the battlers, if they're into kind of a D&D like interest, which like obviously with D&D you have to have a certain number of people to play. I think of it, because obviously you kind of build your character, you strengthen your character, you can choose your character, then you build around it. I think it's a great just comfort game at the end of the day, while also still doing a bit of activity in it.
I think so. And with that being said, yeah, Loop Hero number 3,